Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm back again with another college football video today. And today I'm pretty much just going to do a roster overview of Penn State. I'm just going to be going position by position, and I'm just going to talk about the projected starters, who at what positions I think are going to do really good, what ones probably need a little bit more depth or could be a little bit better, and just overall just talk about how far this Penn State team can go in my eyes and what they can do better to, have a better chance at winning a national championship and, what they also do really well. So, yeah, I'm just going to jump right into it. Like I said, I'm going to start by talking about position groups, and I'm going to start on offense, and I think this is the strongest part of Penn State's whole team. These two groups are tied for the strongest, in my opinion, and I think I'm going to start with the Penn State offensive line. I think this Penn State offensive line is one of the better offensive lines that I've seen from Penn State, and just overall in college football. It's a very experienced and talented offensive line. It all starts with the left tackle, Drew Shelton. Played really good for Penn State last season, and he's back again this year. Obviously, he's a senior. You also have your left guard is, in my opinion, the best guard on the team, or the best lineman on the team. My bad. And I can't say his name, but his name's Ionai. That's how I would pronounce it. And he was a top 10 lineman according to PFF. So I believe he was like number 8 or 9. But yeah, that's a really good lineman right there. Your center, Nick Dawkins, right guard, Cooper Cousins. He's the only one that wasn't a starter from this previous offensive line last year. But I think that he's going to be a great fill-in. He was a really high recruit. And then your starting right tackle, Nolan Rucci. So yeah, those starting linemen are great. That makes, for me, in my opinion, based off of what I've seen, that's a top 3 line. Last year, there's a reason why Nick Singleton and Katron Allen were running all over the place on teams. The holes that Penn State was making were absolutely massive, and they just did a great job for them last year. So yeah, overall, their line's awesome. They also have Jevin Williams. He was a really high recruit for Penn State, I believe, 2 years ago. And yeah, he's another depth piece in case anybody gets hurt. And they also got a transfer guard, TJ Shanahan from Texas A&M. He was an 88 overall star recruit in the transfer portal. So yeah, if a guard goes down, you have that. And yeah, in my opinion, I think this is just a great overall starting group. And not to mention, they also have some pretty decent depth that some of these guys could be starters on different teams. So I'm gonna give Penn State line an A+. I think it's one of the best in the country, a top 3 line in the country, and I think that's gonna be the driving force for Penn State again this year. That's what they like to do. They like to run the ball, and it all starts up front. So yeah, Penn State gets an A+ for the offensive line. On to the next position. This is the other one that I said is tied with the offensive line, the Penn State running back group. I just got done talking about them. Singleton and Katron Allen, they're both amazing. It's hard to tell which one's even better. They both complement each other really well. They both have their own little style that makes them good, and yeah, like I said, they just complement each other really well. I think I like Singleton a little bit more, but it's like I said, they're both amazing. Singleton had 1,099 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 6.4 yards per carry this previous season. When you think about 6.4 yards per carry, if you know football, that's a crazy number. That's like half a first down, over half a first down every time he touches the football. So that's a crazy number. That's an absolutely amazing stat for Penn State. And then Katron Allen is not far behind, 1,108 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 5 yards per carry. That's amazing, too. So yeah, overall, that 1-2 punch that they have, that's better than any other duo in the country. And you're not going to find anything better than that. They're going to be able to run the ball really well again this year. And it's because of this line and obviously the talent with Katron and Singleton. And I also wanted to note that their third string and fourth string running backs are not anything to scoff at either. If anything would happen to Katron or Singleton, they have people that can step in and probably fill in that RB2 role for them. One's Corey Smith. He's from Wisconsin. He was the number 3 back from Wisconsin, a 90 overall recruit. And the other one is Quentin Martin. He was the number 3 running back from PA, 94 overall star recruit. So yeah, overall just a really talented group, and your 1-2 punch is the best in the country. They're both the top 10 running backs according to PFF. They're great. So I would also give the Penn State running back group A+. Those would be the only 2 A+ I would give to any of the positions on offense, personally. I'll keep going here now, though. The next position that I wanted to talk about was the Penn State QB room. I think that Drew Aller, obviously, he's your starting quarterback. I don't really like to talk about depth too much when you talk about the quarterback position, because if Drew Aller goes down and Ethan Grunkenmeyer has to come in and be the starter, you're probably not looking at a great outcome of a season. He's just not, I don't think he's as near as talented as Aller, and not to mention he really has no experience whatsoever either. So, yeah, I gave the Penn State QB room an A. I'm a big believer in Drew Aller. I thought that he looked really good in the opportunities that he was given. He had 3,327 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions this previous season. I believe he also had a 77 QBR, which is pretty solid. But overall, those numbers aren't crazy, but anyone that actually watches the Penn State games knows that it's not necessarily Aller's fault, just the way that they run their scheme and the way that Penn State goes about playing offense. So, yeah, I think that Aller, if he would have went into this draft, he would have been a first-round pick. He's a cannon of an arm. He's a big kid. He's semi-mobile. He can move around pretty well for his size. And I just think overall he's a great quarterback. I mean, he did make that mistake against Notre Dame, but everybody makes a mistake. And I think that especially him coming back for his senior season, yeah, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, in my opinion, a top 3 quarterback, if not the best quarterback. I mean, Cade Klubnik's really good, but Drew Aller could be the best quarterback when it's all said and done. I don't think that he'll have the best stats, but I think that he can probably lead his offense just as good as anybody in the country. So, yeah, I'm going to give the Penn State QB room an A. Their depth is okay. There's nothing special about it. Ethan Grunkenmeyer's, I guess, a decent backup. He's a 4-star. So, but yeah, Drew Aller, I give him an A. I don't think there's any A-plus QBs for this upcoming season. I have to see more out of Arch Manning. I'm sure that there will be one that lights it up and throws for like 40 touchdowns or something, but nothing that really screams that to me as of right now. But on to the next position group for Penn State. This is the Penn State tight end room that I want to talk about next. And I think that this tight end room is really talented, but I also don't think that there's a lot of experience there. And I say that because obviously Tyler Warren was practically Penn State's whole team last year. He had 1,500 yards total. He scored a ton of touchdowns. He was taking snaps at quarterback, at receiver, in the slot, wherever you wanted him to play. He would play there, and he was the main part. He's 50% of Penn State's offense last year. So whoever it is, it's going to most likely be Luke Reynolds, but whoever it is has big shoes to fill, and I think it's going to be very, very hard to get that production back in just one season, especially with young players. Luke Reynolds last year had 111 yards, 1 touchdown. Obviously, it's not a talent issue. It's just because he was buried in the depth chart because Tyler Warren is just a great tight end. And yeah, overall, we're just gonna have to wait and see what Luke Reynolds and Dinkins had. He's another decent tight end, kind of like more of the blocking type. 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then they have a freshman 5-star that came in. I highly doubt that he'll have any significant playing time this year, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I think Luke Reynolds will easily be your tight end 1. Like I said, do I think that he's going to be able to put up the numbers that Warren did, 1,500 yards? All power to him if he ends up doing that. I just don't think that that's a logical way to think about that. I would say for a sophomore tight end that has had little experience playing so far, I would say a good year for him would be like 800 yards, 700, 800 yards, and maybe a couple touchdowns, But if you can get more out of him, that's amazing, and, they could be really good if that ends up happening. But for right now, since the lack of experience and the lack of production, he is a 5-star, Luke Reynolds, and they also have, like I said, Dinkins and another freshman 5-star. So I'm going to give that room a B. I think that's a pretty fair grade for that because, like I said, they haven't played yet. So I'm not just going to say, a player is automatically, the next Tyler Warren out of nowhere. I'm going to have to see some production first. So, yeah, I'm going to give them a B, that group. And then the Penn State wide receiver room, I gave a B-. I think overall this group could be improved from last year, but I don't think there's anything screaming that it's an absolute guarantee that they improved from last year. Obviously, Harrison Wallace was your wide receiver 1. He had limited production and limited opportunities. Actually, all the Penn State wide receivers had limited opportunities because Tyler Warren took up, like I said, over 50% of the target share, and that's just the way that it's going to be when you're throwing to one person that often. So, yeah, Harrison Wallace, he had a hard time getting opportunities, but he still did decent. He wasn't anything crazy. He wasn't anything super flashy, but he had like 750, 800 yards and a couple touchdowns for Penn State. I would compare that to like Trevor Pena, the transfer that they just got from like Syracuse. That's a pretty good like swap right there. I could see Wallace having a good season for Ole Miss and a new system, and I think this guy could come in and put up similar numbers to what Wallace did for Penn State. So I think that's a pretty good swap there. I also thought that, in my opinion, I thought Amari Evans was a pretty nice little player too. Not Not to say that he had much production, but if you look at his numbers, him having like, I forget how many receptions he had, but it's like 30 receptions for like 300, 400 yards, which is crazy. That's like 15 yards a catch. So, you lose him, but you get Ross. You get Deontay Ross, and he's a receiver from Temple. He had like 1,000 yards for Temple. He was a good player. 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, I believe, for Temple. So, good player. But also, he was a 3-star in the portal, probably for a reason. Who knows? Maybe he comes out and puts up 1,000 for Penn State. But the way I think of it, there's a reason why he's probably a 3-star. He's probably a decent little receiver, but I wouldn't expect him to be anything more than, an average slot receiver in the Big Ten. And then Kyron Hudson, he's going to be a senior this upcoming year. It's another player that I'm just not going to get super excited about until I see more production. He's playing for USC, which is a team that passes quite often, and he's had little to no production up until this point. This previous year, he had 462 yards and 3 touchdowns. If you remember the one-handed crazy catch that he had, it's pretty cool. But like I said, the production's just not there. So we'll see what he can bring to the table for them, but I'm not going to get any. He's like similar to Amari Evans to me. He's not anything, anything crazy. And you have Liam Clifford as your wide receiver 4, unless Tyrese Denmark beats him out. But let's just say it's going to be Liam Clifford. He's been there for a long time. 286 yards, 1 touchdown last year. You know what you're getting with Liam Clifford. He's like your average, not even average. He's below average, but a little depth receiver that, catch the ball if you throw it to him. If it's in his vicinity, he's not too bad. So, yeah, it's overall not a bad wide receiver room. It could have been much worse. I'm glad that they brought in Trevor Penn, because without him, I feel like the room was much weaker. It's not to say Trevor Penn is like a top 10 receiver or, he's like going to be like a super dominant wide receiver 1. It's just the thought that you brought somebody in to replace, the receivers that left you. And if you didn't, that was going to be tough, because you're going to need something out of this wide receiver room. That's the bottom line this year. You're going to need a lot more out of it. The ball's going to be a lot more spread out, because you don't have a Tyler Warren anymore, unless, like I said, Luke Reynolds emerges into something crazy at a young age. But for right now, you're going to need to get production out of those receivers. And for right now, I think, like I said, it's a decent wide receiver room. I would give it like average to slightly above average. That's what I would say about the room. I wouldn't say it's a top 10 room or like one of the best in the country. I'd say it's more middle of the road, but definitely improved from what it could have been. And I would give their room a B-. The Penn State wide receiver room, I'd give them a B-. So overall, their offense overall is probably like an A- grade, just overall, which is very good. It's a really balanced and polished team. There's still some things that they could do better, and we'll get into that more in a little bit after I get done doing these position grades. But on to the defense. I wanted to start off with the defense. I think that the Penn State defensive end room is probably the best room that they have on the defense. Like I said, Denai Dennis-Sutton, he was a really productive player for you last year. 8.5 sacks, 40-some tackles, really good player. I talked about Zariah Fisher. I'm pretty big on him because, like I said, in 2023, he had 3.5 sacks. He had 20 tackles, having a decent season. Was supposed to start last year in 2024, but he was hurt, so he didn't get to play. And now he's probably going to get his opportunity to start at that D-end opposite of Denai Dennis-Sutton, which will be nice to see. And, overall, I'm just going to, as long as those 2 DNs stay healthy, the depth isn't anything crazy for Penn State. It's another spot where they could probably use a little more depth. They don't have a lot of, like, star power or, like, anyone with crazy production behind them. But as long as Sutton and Zariah Fisher can stay healthy, I think you're in really good shape. And I'd honestly give the Penn State DN room an A-. I think it's a really solid room, like I said. Experienced players, have some good young guys in there too. And, yeah, they'll be a solid group. Onto the Penn State D-tackle room. This is kind of like a hard grade for me to give because I looked into the whole D-tackle room. It's one position where you kind of want to be able to rotate people in and out. If you watch football, there's a reason why there's all the DNs and the D-tackles are in and out, because you want to have a little rotation going on. Some guys, they're in there for run stuffing down. Some guys are in there for pass rushing. And you want to be able to have a versatile team and a versatile group of people that you can pick from and pull from. And I think that Penn State's D-tackle, the heck is his name? I can't think of it. Zane Durant. I think Zane Durant is one of the best D-tackles in the country. PFF, I believe, ranked him as either the number 2 or number 3 D-tackle in the nation. So he's obviously amazing. He's a star. And he's going to be very productive for Penn State in this upcoming year. He had 42 tackles and 3 sacks this previous year. That's really good for a D-tackle. But then after that, apparently from what I seen and seen online, Caleb Artis is supposed to be the starter. He's coming into his sophomore year, and he only had like, I believe, like 5 or 6 tackles this previous year. He's supposed to be the other D tackle, so it's kind of a new player. He's a little bit inexperienced, but and then also there's Alonzo Ford, who is another D tackle. He played at Old Dominion, had some decent numbers at Old Dominion, had like 3 sacks and 40 tackles, but he hasn't really gotten any playing time at Penn State yet, probably just because of the talent gap, that, the jump from Old Dominion to Penn State. So yeah, overall I think it's a pretty good room, especially Zane Durant's an A+ D tackle, but I would say overall the room, just because it's not like, it doesn't have a ton of depth, and there's not, after Zane Durant, there's not a lot of experience. I'd probably give it between a B+ and an A-, somewhere in that range right there. On to Penn State's linebacking group. I think this group is also pretty damn good. When you look at Dom DeLuca and Tony Rojas, those are your top 2 linebackers. In my opinion, I think Rojas is the more well-rounded linebacker and the better of the two. He had 58 tackles last year. He had one pass defended and 3 interceptions, which 3 interceptions is pretty impressive for a linebacker, especially with 58 tackles as well. Shows how versatile he really is. He didn't make the top 10 linebacker list, but I think that he could easily be a top 10 linebacker. He's right outside of it. He's a really damn good player. And yeah, overall, he's one of the better players on Penn State's defense. I think he'll be a captain for them, big part of their defense. And then Dom DeLuca is the other one. I'm not as big of a fan of Dom DeLuca. He's still a really good backer, was really productive for Penn State, had 40 tackles, 0.5 sacks, and 3 interceptions. I think that he's a good player. He's a little undersized to be a middle backer, but overall he's still really productive. 3 picks. He had a big pick, I believe it was the SMU game or one of the games. He had a pick 6. But yeah, that's awesome. So your top 2 linebackers are great. The problem is there's really little to no depth after either of the backers. I know they're in talks with a North Carolina linebacker that has he's a good player. He's a productive player, like 40 tackles, 3.5 sacks. But right now I'm just rating the current roster. They could definitely use a little bit of linebacker depth. If Tony Rojas went down, you could be in trouble pretty quickly. And yeah, like I said, I don't even know. Keon Wiley is the one. He's the 3rd linebacker that they have listed. He was another player that played a little bit in 2023. I believe he had, minimal stats. He only had he played in a couple of the games, like 30% of the games, but he hasn't really seen the field much. And then Anthony Specca, who also, he's a younger player. He's going to be a sophomore. He doesn't have any stats. So, yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty good grouping, especially with your 1-2 with Rojas and DeLuca. But because of the depth being a little bit thin, I'd probably give the room a B or B+, just because there's not a ton of depth. But your 1-2, again, it's great. And then on to the safeties for Penn State. I think this room is one of the most versatile rooms on this team. I don't think that there's I don't think that they have a super big stud in this room, but Zakee Wheatley is a beast. I think that he could be a stud for this upcoming year. They didn't, like I said, PFF didn't have him graded as a top 10 player either, but he easily could be. He's right on the outside of it, I would assume. He had 95 tackles for them this previous year. 4 passes defended and 3 interceptions. Those are really good numbers. That's 100 tackles, 3 picks. Can't ask much more than that out of a safety. And like I said, I think he's going to improve, and he could end up being a star for Penn State this year. The other safety that they have that started, he kind of plays like a slot role for them as well, is Zion Tracy. He had 30 tackles, 1 pass defended, and 2 interceptions as well. It's another really good player. And then I think Dijon Lane is going to be your other safety that starts. 9 tackles, 3 passes defended, and a pick last year. And King Mack transferred back from Alabama, who was a 90+ overall recruit when he came out of high school. Hasn't really gotten a lot of playing time, but it's good depth there as well. So 4 players that could really probably play for you whenever you need at safety, and then those nickel and slot roles. So I think overall it's just a great room. And yeah, I think it's very versatile, and you have a lot of experience, so it's a pretty good room. I give it probably a A-. I think that the Penn State safeties are pretty good. Maybe a B+. It's not. Dejon Lee hasn't played a ton yet, but he's still a pretty good player. I'd probably give it a B+ or an A-. And then Penn State's cornerbacks. I think this is another good group. AJ Harris, they rated, I believe, as the 8th best or 7th best corner in the country. He was a transfer from Georgia in this previous season. He had 48 tackles, 5 passes defended, and a pick. It's really good numbers for him. I think that he's going to be It's really solid. He'll be one of the pretty high pick in this upcoming draft as well. And then their other cornerback, they lost their starting cornerback from this previous season, but he wasn't anything special, in my opinion, to begin with. But they have a starter this year who also had playing time last year. Elliott Washington, he'll probably be your other corner, starting at corner. 26 tackles, 6 passes defended, 1 interception. Those are pretty good numbers. And I just always love to see experience and to see that Penn State has these guys that actually got to play in some meaningful games and snaps. That goes a long way. So I think that, Elliott Washington, he's going to be a good player for Penn State too. And their third cornerback that I seen that had some depth, I believe that this was in 2023 when he had these stats. Maybe it was his previous year. No, I think it was his previous year. Davion Collins, he had 26 tackles, 1 passes defended, and 1 interception. Just another cornerback and a guy that you can move around from safety to corner to in the slot, whatever. That just, he was pretty productive for Penn State there as well. So overall, I think that their roster is great. And their cornerback room, I'd probably give it, a B plus, A minus again. I think overall if I had to give their roster a grade, I give this roster a grade an A. I give an A, and I wouldn't give any roster this year an A plus, because an A plus is like the best that you can get to, and I don't think any team doesn't have weaknesses. Those teams that get A pluses to me are like LSU from when they had like Joe Burrow and Chase and Jefferson, or like 2020 Alabama with Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, Najee. Those teams are A plus teams, but this team is not far behind, and I would say there's probably like 3 to 4 teams that are A teams this year, and Penn State is one of them for me. I think Penn State is such a well-rounded team, top to bottom, and yeah, they do things the right way, and they're really rounded out. But now I just want to get into what I think about just overall, what I think about this for Penn State, like what I think about their season, and what I think that, could hold them back, or what I think that, what I think that they can do a little bit better. And one thing that I think that is a 100% guarantee for Penn State is that Penn State is going to be really great at running the football. It's one thing that they do really, really well every year, and there's no reason to believe that they're not going to do it again. I know for a fact that the running game, they could be the best running football team in the league. I think they probably honestly will be in the country. I mean, they have Nick Singleton, they have Katron Allen, they have probably, if not the best line in the country, one of the best. And yeah, they're going to be able to run the ball really effectively, probably get 5-6 yards a carry. And yeah, that's just a way that Penn State likes to run their team, run their offense. They like to chew the clock up. They like to control the time of possession, and they'll drive down the field, and they'll wear you down, and eventually they'll come away with the win. That's just the way Penn State plays. The other thing that I wanted to go over, I think that Drew Aller's a solid QB. I don't think that he's a bad quarterback. There's a lot of people that bailed on him after the Notre Dame game. Wasn't a good look. Obviously, he threw a pick. It could have been, something that he could have made a better decision. But he's still a solid quarterback, and I'm not giving up on Drew Aller. I think he's still very talented, and I think he can take you a long way if you give him the players that. You put the players around Drew Aller. I think that he could be a really solid quarterback. And he already is solid. I just think that he could be a lot better if maybe the scheme was a little bit catered toward him a little bit more, or, your receivers were a little bit better. But overall, I think you still have a top 5 quarterback there. And the other thing that I know for a fact about Penn State is that their defense is experienced, and it's going to be really solid again. It probably could be, it could be the top defense in the league. There's a couple that are contending for it, I think. But, a top 3 defense, in my opinion. Top to bottom, you have star players. You have guys, you got some good backers. You got some good secondary players, good D linemen. That's what makes a good defense. It's spread out all over the field. And yeah, I think that that's just 100% guarantee. You're going to have one of the best defenses in the country again. So I think that it's going to be a very similar look to last year. I think you're going to see a lot of running the football. Like I said, controlling the clock, dominating the run, and just playing great defense and getting the ball back in the offense's hands and just not making a lot of mistakes and grinding games out. And that's just the way that, like I said, Penn State has always done things. But now I'm going to talk about some things that I really don't know, some things like uncertainties that I have with the team and things that could possibly probably hinder them if Penn State doesn't address it. The biggest thing for me, and I thought about it for a long time about Penn State, the biggest question that I have is who's going to replace Tyler Warren's production? And I know it's really easy to say that this guy's going to step up and these receivers are going to step up. But until you see production from people and you know 100% this is what this guy can give me. This previous year, he gave me 800 yards. I know I can get another 800 this year or 1,000 or whatever. Until you see a guy play a full season, you don't know how effective the player is going to be. And when you have a guy that how important Tyler Warren was last year, there's no Penn State fan that can deny that Tyler Warren was 50% of that offense. He did so much for them, and so many clutch third downs, so much he did for the team. And there's a reason why he was drafted in the first round, drafted 14th to the Colts. And we're just gonna have to wait and see who can make up for the production. It doesn't really matter who it is. If you can have Trevor Pena, Hudson, Ross, and Luke Reynolds all have like 600, 700 yards, everybody be like semi-productive, like pretty good players, and you don't necessarily need to have a Tyler Warren. That's not the point that I'm trying to get at here. You don't need to have like an alpha wide receiver one, but you do. If you don't have that, everybody needs to be productive. Luke Reynolds is going to have 800 yards. You're going to have production out of all three receivers. It's not going to work if, you just have average people out there, because like I said, you're going to have to make up for that production somewhere. And that's a question that I have. Who's going to be the one to step up? Is it going to be the receiving group? Is it going to be Luke Reynolds? We'll see what happens with that, but that concerns me a little bit. There's a reason why Penn State struggles in these situations where they have to pass at the end of games, like in the Notre Dame game when Drew Aller threw that pick. There's a reason why they struggle, and it's because last year Tyler Warren's your main target. You take that away, which is what Notre Dame really tried to do that whole time. And Aller looked like crap. I'm just going to be honest. That was a really bad game for Aller. That last throw, everyone makes mistakes, but overall that game just did not look good for Aller. And a lot of it, the receivers aren't the best, I'm not going to lie, but that's the whole point. Who's going to be able to step up when it matters? Because Penn State's formula of running the ball 95% of the time, running a couple play action passes, playing defense, that formula works 98% of the time. They can beat just about 98% of any team in the country using that formula. And it's evident. It showed this previous year that Penn State could use that same thing, and I think they should have stuck to it in the Notre Dame game. I think they got way too pass happy. I love the pass, but that's just not who Penn State is. And if they would have kept running the ball with how many yards they were averaging, Katron and Nick, they were averaging 6 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry, and they got away from it. But, you can beat a lot of teams. But it showed when they played really good passing football teams, when they played in Ohio State, when they played in Oregon, they couldn't do that anymore. Because a lot of the time they put Penn State in uncomfortable situations. They were putting Aller in 3rd and 5 and beyond, 3rd and 10s. And now Drew Aller has to make a good pass numerous times on a drive. Instead of being able to run the ball down the field and only have to throw maybe 2 or 3 important passes on the drive, when you play Ohio State and Oregon, you got to throw 10. You got to throw 6. You got to make 6 or 5 throws for a first down. And that's the difference. And that's where I always have my doubts about Penn State. I have a hard time ever betting on Penn State over Ohio State or Oregon, or really, in my opinion, any team that's like the same on the same level as Penn State or better, because they just never ever show out in that department. They never pass the ball well, and they really struggle with it. And this is my opinion on football and my outlook on football in general. I would much rather have a team that can strike quick, like in Oregon, or have a team that can, like even how Ohio State won. Of course, Henderson and Judkins were great, but the main part of that team was Jeremiah Smith, Ibuka, Cardell Tate, and their, how they can score in one play. A little drag to Jeremiah Smith, boom, 70-yard touchdown. Right down the sideline, fade to Jeremiah Smith, 2 seconds, touchdown. Penn State doesn't get those plays. Unless it's Nick Singleton or Katron Allen breaking one for 60 yards, Penn State don't get touchdowns to their receivers in big plays. And their one big play guy that they had last year that surprisingly, gave you those big 30-yard catches and catches in the end zone, he's gone. So like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see how far this type of offense can take you. Do I think it can win you a lot of games? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. I don't think Penn State loses more than one game this year. I don't think that they lose to both Oregon and Ohio State. They could probably go undefeated even. Their team is really well-rounded. It's probably more well-rounded than Oregon or Ohio State maybe. Ohio State probably has more stars and talent, but Penn State probably is the more well-rounded team. But are they going to be able to run the ball effectively all game long on Ohio State? Are they going to be able to make the passes when they have to make the passes? Because again, like I just said, Ohio State can score in literally 2 plays. And, if Penn State takes 6 minutes, it doesn't matter if, you're controlling the clock. If OSU can score in 2 seconds, or it doesn't matter. You're going to have to be able to pass at some point. So, yeah, overall, I think that this Penn State team is really good. I think that's just my big criticism with them is, what are you going to do without Tyler Warren, and how's this passing game going to be? And other than that, there's not much that I really have to say about Penn State. There's literally no flaw that I have any kind of, discrepancy with them. They're a great football team. I think last year their defense was absolutely amazing. They played great against all the teams they played. They played tough. And they, like I said, they have stars in every facet, every level of the game. They have good safeties, good corners, good D linemen, good linebackers. You could use a little bit of depth here or there, but there's a lot of experience on this team. And I know for a fact their defense is going to be great. And we'll see how far that can take them. We'll see how far having a great defense and being able to run the ball can take you. Because the crazy thing is it would have literally, if they would have stuck to that in the Notre Dame game, they could have won the game. And they literally still could have won the game. It was so close. So that formula can work. And that can get you to a national championship. And it could possibly win you a national championship. We're just going to have to wait and see. But I'll tell you right now, Ohio State's offense is going to be just as, if this quarterback that they have, it's going to be just as loaded, and they're going to have a super high-flying passing offense where they're able to throw the ball down the field very efficiently and fast. And, you bring back Jeremiah Smith, you bring back Tate, Brandon Innes, you get the best tight end in the portal, Max Clark. That's a good freaking team, and they're going to be able to throw the ball down the field, just like a couple other teams this year with the weapons that they bring to the table. So I feel like it's a really cool team, a really, really well structured Penn State team. Lots of good players around the whole entire team, but yeah, we'll just see if their formula works. It's kind of one of the only teams in the country that sticks to this, ground and pound type mentality. You see a lot more teams that like to pass and get pass happy now. They're throwing for 30, 35 passing attempts at a time. But overall, if I had to rank Penn State right now, and before the season, I'd probably put them at 3. And I put them at 3 just because I think there's 2 teams that I'd put ahead of them. I think I'd put Ohio State and Alabama ahead of them just slightly. I think that they have, like I said, what I look for in a football team. I like a team that can throw the ball down the field. And it's not to say Penn State can't win with this formula. They absolutely can. Maybe their receiving core comes out. Trevor Pena, Hudson, Ross, maybe all these guys come out and they're great. And, Drew Aller comes into himself and he's throwing for 30-plus touchdowns. If that happens and, that's the reality, Luke Reynolds is great and they're throwing the ball really well, I'd take Penn State right now. Penn State would be my number 1 team. I just can't get my head over all these years where Penn State struggled doing this, passing the ball. They still haven't done enough for me, especially with losing Tyler Warren and some of the other receivers. It's not enough for me to just get on the boat and just say, yeah, here we go. Penn State, is going all the way. I think that they didn't really address where I wanted them to address. If Penn, like I've said to some of my buddies, if Penn State had a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams or, one of these top receivers, I think that you're in a lot better of shape. And that's just the only reason why I put them at 3. I think they have just as good of a roster as anybody else. I think they have a more complete roster than Ohio State for sure. It's close for sure. It's not like it's a, huge gap or anything like that. But like I said, Ohio State has the star power, and I'll take the team that can score quick and efficiently than the team that, goes down the field a little bit slower. But again, they almost beat Notre Dame with that same formula, and who knows what would have happened against Ohio State in a rematch game. Penn State could have won doing what they're doing, playing great defense. It just takes the right game. But I think they struggle when they get down and they get behind. And I think that's going to happen at any time you play a good team. I don't see Penn State coming out and just pounding the shit out of Ohio State or Oregon. I think there's going to be moments where it's like it's 3rd and 12 and Drew Aller's got to look down the barrel of a DN coming right at him and make a tight throw to one of these receivers. Who's it going to be that steps up? So that's what it comes down to for me. If you tell me that Luke Reynolds ends up being like 70% of what Tyler Warren is, I think this team could go to the, national championship, or these receivers can step up and actually be productive players. I think that they could possibly go to the national championship. But for right now, like I said, I give that room like a B minus. I don't think it's one of the better rooms in the country. And I think the way that college football has trended, I think it's really, really important to be able to throw the ball, especially downfield. So Yeah, that's pretty much all I have for today and this overview. I hope that you enjoyed it. Yeah, I wanted to just go over all the positions and just make sure that I went over each position group and just also give what I think about this team and how far I think they can go, what their strengths are, what'll hold them back. And there's not much that'll hold this team back. I think it literally comes down to that one specific thing, and that is how do you replace like Warren? How's the passing game going to be? Is it going to be effective enough when the time comes? Because there's no surprise. Penn State's going to come out against these first how many opponents, and they're going to run the rock. They're going to run it hard. The defense is going to play out of their mind, and Penn State's going to kill football teams just like this previous year. Don't be surprised when that happens. But my question is against Ohio State and Oregon, are they going to be able to do enough passing the ball, and who's going to step up for them? And right now, I don't have enough. They don't have enough experience and production for me to say yes, this they can do it this year. I think that it's possible, but I'm gonna have to see it first. So yeah, that's my overview of Penn State right now. I'd probably rank them at 3 or 2. And yeah, one of the best teams in the country and could easily win a national championship. Have a really cool, constructed team. I like the way they play. Like I said, there's not many teams that are like these hard-nosed, run-the-ball teams anymore. It's cool to see a team play like that. And yeah, we'll see how far it can take Penn State. And yeah, we are Penn State, baby. Later.